Welcome to the Communicating Capital podcast, where finance and communication get a fresh perspective. Hosted by a dynamic team of women in the industry, we're here to redefine the conversation with candid, no-nonsense interviews featuring top executives, media experts, communication wizards, and industry leaders. With a focus on clarity and real-world impact, we make the complex world of finance digestible and relatable. So whether you're a seasoned professional or you're just interested in our world, we're here to help you navigate the space in new and exciting ways. Today, joining us from Atlanta, Georgia, is my good friend Jason Assad. Just for a short introduction, Jason is a highly regarded IR and corporate comms strategist. He has experience spanning Bitcoin mining, biotech, tech, and so much more. Jason's expertise in investor relations, public relations, crisis management has made him a trusted advisor to numerous private and publicly traded companies that I've actually had the pleasure of seeing firsthand. So Jason, welcome to the show.
Thanks, Jessica. I really appreciate you having me. Thank you.
We're so happy to have you. Jason, something I know about you, you've built really an impressive career. I know that you've worked with clients across a wide range of different industries, from Bitcoin mining to biotech to technology. Can you tell us a little bit about your journey, how you started? How did you go from the Jason maybe 20 years ago all the way to now?
Yeah, that's a great question. I was actually an equities trader and I always loved the stock market. Had a position in a small company out of Tennessee at the time, a very vested interest. I had grown to know management and, had made an investment in the company, and kind of a baptism by fire situation. I got a call one day from the partner of the CEO, who was the COO of the company, called me one evening and said, "We've got a problem." And I said, "Okay." He said, Our CEO and our IR guy have been arrested as part of an Operation Wooden Nickel in New York.
What? Wait a second.
Yeah, you can't make this stuff up. So they got arrested. They showed up at the CEO's house. Just a good old boy from Tennessee showed up with black vans and the whole 9 yards, and arrested him, arrested the IR guy, and it was Operation Wooden Nickel. They busted 46 currency traders and 2 guys from this small little company. Ironically, it had been an undercover sting, and these guys were in the wrong place at the wrong time. And it's the long story short is, the CEO had to step down, the IR guy had to step down, I had a vested interest, they had come to know me, and he called me, says, "I need your help." And it's one of those things, Jessica, where you look in the mirror and you go, I'm not that good, but we figured it out. We addressed it. It was a pretty full-blown crisis. And, we moved on from there and formulated a plan, and we executed it. And it was, like I said, that's why I said it was baptism by fire, because it's not something you can plan for, not something I envisioned happening. But to this day, you can Google it. It's quite a story.
That is so insane. I had no idea that that's how you got started and just you were thrown right into it. So that's wild.
I had no intention of being an IR guy, but ironically, I had gone to school for journalism. I had a public relations degree. I'd always loved that. So it was a good fit because I was able to mix the two worlds of investing, dealing with people, PR. So it was a nice kind of a niche that I was able to form. But yeah, I was drugging, kicking, and screaming.
That's so wild. I had no idea. But of course, if there is one person that would have a story similar to that, it's definitely you with your experience, especially in crisis comms. And Jason, could you tell us a little bit about what you do now for companies? Is it similar, different?
So I'm not really your stereotypical IR guy. I have a lot of relationships over the years, a lot of contacts. I do have a background, like I said, in PR. I understand social media. I understand investor psychology well. So I bring a little bit more of a broader thing than your stereotypical generic IR offering, which is your press releases, taking investor phone calls, setting up meetings, things like that. I'd like to consider myself a little bit more of a value add, a little bit more in the foxhole, more of a partner with management, as opposed to a third-party vendor. That's why I tend to work with companies that I believe in and I like, because a lot of these IR firms, as you know, they have 30, 40 clients. You as the customer, you're one of many. They're not available on the weekend. They have their office hours. They're a vendor. They're not really what I view as a partner. And
Right.
so I like to think that I a little bit more in the foxhole type of person with management, more of a confidant.
I love that. And that's what I've heard. I've heard people talk about you before because you definitely have built such a strong reputation. And when I say talk about you, I mean talk about you positively, obviously. And so you've built such a strong reputation. So it's interesting to see that. And Jason, something that I do know is that you've worked with different companies. So Bitcoin miners, biotech, some tech companies. I feel like each company has a different set of ways that they'd like to communicate with like an investor, with the media. How do you adapt your approach to meet each client's needs, especially if they're in different industries?
Really, some of that depends on whether they are an institutional ready type of client or are they predominantly retail. Retail, as you know, is a tremendous influence now on small securities and securities in general. They tend to be very transient and like stories. There's not a lot of long-term investors. So I guess really you have to differentiate. Are they an institutional ready, trying to go upstream type of customer, or are they predominantly retail driving your valuation? Obviously, as you get more institutionally focused, the questions, the desire for knowledge is much more specific, much more granular, as where retail is predominantly more of a 32-foot type of view of tell me how I'm going to make money. They're not going to look into the balance sheet. They're not going to look into all those type of things. So it has to go, as you go more up the chain, there's more specificity in which you have to communicate with those investors.
That's actually quite interesting because we see it from the PR side, everything that's on the outside, but noting like, okay, you have this audience, which is institutions, this side, which is retail. I feel like a lot goes into that. So I do have an important question for you. Who's your favorite client and why? I'm just kidding. I'm just kidding. You don't have to.
Listen, here's the irony in you asking me that question. I'm glad you said the caveat is that you were kidding because you know me, I would answer it in a heartbeat.
I know. You're like, let me rank them for you and I'll tell you exactly why.
I completely out myself. Listen, here's the cool thing. The cool thing is that I work with some really amazing people. And it's taken me a long time, 20 plus years of being able to now decide who I work with, do everything by referral. I don't advertise, don't have a website. Everything I do brought in by shareholders, brought in by management of other companies. So now I get to work with companies that I really believe in. And I think, when you're younger in the business, sometimes you have to work with people that you may not necessarily, they may not share your view on things. I'll just leave it at that. But I get to work with some phenomenal people, some highly accomplished, successful, articulate people in numerous different spaces. So to me, it's kind of cool looking around the room and saying, being involved. Lots of times I do a lot of listening because there's a lot of people I work with that I highly, highly respect, highly accomplished. And I'm a big believer that, if you can, hitch your wagon to people who are smarter and better than you and soak up that information and learn. I mean, I've been very fortunate to work with some really high quality people that I hold in high regard. So that's been cool to me.
I love hearing that. I feel like all of us that are on the service provider side, I feel like we do want that, and luckily for us, we do work with some incredible people as well. But I know that there's others out there that we'll definitely gel with down the line. That actually leads me to the next question. What type of clients do you typically choose to work with? And how do you go about evaluating who's going to be the best fit for Jason?
Yeah, that's a great question. So going back to what I just said a second ago, management is really important, and being able to pick and choose who I work with now. I find that there's a lot of hypocrisy in my world because people will get paid to tell you what they're supposed to tell you. If I don't fundamentally believe in a company or the people, especially management, it's really hard for me to advocate for them. I think that to do that, there's some real hypocrisy in telling somebody to do something with their money that you're not in fact willing to do with your own money. I think that just makes you a hypocrite. So I have earned the right to be selective. I don't have to take a client to pay the bills. But at the same time, I think what makes people ultimately good is that they're genuine, there's integrity, and they're not selling you on something they don't fundamentally believe in.
I love that you say that. It just shows that you are quite ethical. And that's something that's super important in IR, especially when you're working with publicly traded companies. I mean, we see so much stuff online and so many different people sharing, whether it's false information or correct information. It's just nice to know that there is that piece of integrity and ethics, really. So thank you for that. Speaking of fighting things that are online that are bad and not good, and things that can happen with companies, whether it be somebody that's writing up something that's completely false about one of your clients, or somebody may leak a press release or something that might happen that is ultimately a crisis. How do you help clients through that? Like, how do you help them maintain trust and credibility when these unexpected challenges come up?
So I am keenly aware that disproving a negative is PR 101. It's a hard thing to do. It's the proverbial yelling fire in the theater, calling somebody names you can't take back. And I had an experience probably, 12, 13 years ago, and probably one of the only IR persons that actually filed a lawsuit against a John Doe who was saying things that were false that I took issue with. And I told him, I knew the person. I said, you can say whatever you want about me. I'm an acquired taste. I agree. But please make sure it's true. And we sued him. We filed a case against John Doe, and let's just say it was settled. I am really principled, and it's really one of my hot buttons when I see people get out on the internet and be keyboard bullies and call people's integrity into question and call them this and allege that they're pumping and dumping and all these assertions which would never be able to be proved, but they're damning on the surface. To me, I take real issue with that. And that's why, I could tell you, I spent a fortune suing the guy. At the end of the day, I didn't get back a fraction of it, but sometimes you got to stick up for yourself, and your reputation matters. And you can have 20 CEOs or people who will tell you this is a good person. He's a fundamentally good person. But then you have one guy go on the internet anonymously and speak poorly of you and make these false assertions. It's really upsetting. Same thing happens with companies. So my point is that I think that transparency is important. I think addressing inaccuracy is important. The problem is sometimes when you get down in the mud with people, Jessica, you get dirty too. So it's one of those things, does it merit addressing? You have to evaluate that. And that's PR, that's your world. Is it water under the bridge? Is the reward worth the risk of now letting other people know these false negatives, right? So it's really one of the things you have to evaluate and decide. When do you dig in? When do you go to war? When do you say bygones? When do you focus on the biggest picture? But on a case-by-case basis, you really have to evaluate things. Like I said, I got drug into this business with the CEO being arrested. That's a really damaging thing. So, what was the plan? Okay, you have to resign. First and foremost, I'm sorry. I know you didn't do anything. I know in time, the legal system will work this out and you'll be vindicated. Okay? I know the facts. The problem is perception becomes reality, which, again, PR 101. Sometimes somebody has to take the bullet, somebody has to fall on their sword, and it's really about the shareholders at that point, and you have to protect the shareholders. And sometimes somebody becomes a sacrificial lamb, and it's about evaluating how you message that, how you compose that plan, how do you message it to the market, how do you follow it up on, and how do you reset expectations and reestablish that credibility? There's a lot that goes into it. Sometimes there's a luck element, right?
Luck, but also skill and experience, which it's very clear that you have. And it is such a big topic, the crisis part of it. And especially now with, even outside of the capital market space, companies are dealing and people are dealing with like deep fakes with AI saying certain things and people are believing things. So I feel like it's so important to be transparent and to set those clear guidelines initially, like you're saying. So I'm going to quickly pivot about something just real quick, because something I wanted to talk about just to make sure that we hit it is because you have different clients in different sectors, and so you have, like I said, biotech, you have Bitcoin mining. I'd like to know about managing and aligning investor sentiment with each company in each different industry. Does that change? Because I don't know, does it vary per company, or how do you manage that?
At the end of the day, I always say this, my wife always makes, she literally, when I told her I was doing this with you today, she goes, let me guess, you're going to use this saying, and she made fun of me. So here I am. She's going to see this and she's going to laugh hysterically. She's going to say, you're so predictable. I believe that people do business with people they like and trust, fundamentally. Doesn't matter what you're selling, doesn't matter if it's you're mining Bitcoin, doesn't matter if you're in biotech trying to develop a drug for Parkinson's or whatever it may be. At the end of the day, a lot of these companies, it's a bet on the jockey, it's a bet on the management team. You got to make sure, are their goals aligned with shareholders? Do they own stock? Do they buy stock? Are they selling their stock, right? I try to find situations where management is rowing the boat in the same way as their shareholders. Doesn't always guarantee success, but to me, it's a great hedge when your goals are aligned. Some of these companies out there, they're lifestyle companies. They're about management. They're enriching management. They're getting their $1 million pay packages while shareholders get diluted. I try to avoid those situations. I call a spade, And at the end of the day, again, whether it's Bitcoin or whatever it may be, they're all trying to build a business, but you got to make sure that management's always really, in my opinion, the strongest and most leverageable asset, right? So that's why I go back to, are their goals aligned? Are they doing the right things? Do they have integrity? So those are some of my thoughts.
And I feel like a lot of our theme of our talk today is transparency. How do you advise clients on maintaining transparency with investors or with the public or even with the media?
So it goes back to what I just said, that, integrity, character, believability, bet on the jockey.
Yeah.
Everybody wants to bet on a winner. Everybody wants to bet on a guy that they feel like they can relate to. I think that's of utmost importance. I always say that IR, PR, it's a process. It's not an event. It's cumulative. It's compounding. You earn credibility by repetition. You earn credibility by setting the bar and achieving it, under promising, overproducing. I think, a lot of lip service in the stock market and the microcap markets and communicates. A lot of it's lip service. I think ultimately the stocks and the companies, the management to do well, they've set expectations, realistic expectations. They achieve them, then they come back and they raise the bar again and they do it again and again. And I think you earn credibility by the repetition of upholding your word and making a promise and fulfilling it. Right? It's really that simple. Whatever their business is, that's the fundamentals to creating value. Are you doing what you said? Are your expectations being fulfilled? Are you creating value? Doesn't matter if you're selling, if you're mining Bitcoin or, developing a drug. Are you doing what you said you're going to do? And are you creating realistic expectations? And can investors say, you know what? You gave me a promise and you fulfilled it. That's what builds goodwill. And goodwill is the foundation of everything in corporate communications. Goodwill is the everything to creating shareholder value. Goodwill is what you're ultimately seeking.
Absolutely. And Jason, what I've seen from you and the companies that you work with is that they actually take that to heart. So I have seen companies, again, they say that they're going to do something and then they just go a little bit higher. And I'm like, Jason probably advised them on exactly what to do, how to say it, because it's so impressive to me when I see the companies that you're working with. I know that you're trusted. I know that you're personable. And also indirectly and directly, you've personally helped me. You've helped all of my endeavors as well, as I'm sure you know, and I just absolutely love working with you. I want to know how you maintain those strong relationships. Like, how do the clients come to trust you as Jason?
Yeah, so good question. Let me step back to what you just said. What you just said about working with you. I mean, people don't know this, but we've had a long-standing relationship. We've worked on many things. I brought you into a lot of my... I try to, when somebody hires me, I feel like they're bringing in a team. The team is somewhat of a family. I think that if I refer somebody, they are a direct indication of the people that I surround myself with, right? So I want to make sure that the people I associate with on my team that I bring to add value collectively with what we're doing, I want to make sure that they're skilled and that they are equally as accountable. And I have to tell you, you've been phenomenal to work with. I like you personally. I love the way you built your business. I think you've got amazing presence. You have natural likability, which is really something you can't teach. But more importantly, I pride myself in being hyper responsive and very accountable. If you send me a text at 2 or 3 o'clock in the morning, odds are you're going to get a return. I don't care if it's Christmas morning. I'm going to return it. It's just the way I am. I'm kind of always have my phone with me, and not the smartest guy, as you see, not the best looking guy, but I'm darn accountable. And I think that's what makes you successful too. So back to what you said about the relationships, it dovetails with that. The CEOs that know, okay, it's a Sunday, I need something. I'm going to call Jason at midnight. He's going to pick up the phone and he's going to get it done. And I will never drop the ball. And you're not going to get that with your traditional third-party vendor, IR firm with 40 clients. That goes back to being in the foxhole versus being a vendor. So I think that answers your question. That accountability, I'm definitely type A, as you know.
Which is so good.
So good. Yeah, it has its good points, and it certainly can be a little annoying at times. But you ask me for something, I'm going to get it done. You say jump, I say how high. It's really that simple. And the reason why that is because as a consultant, this is how I support my family. It's how I support my kids in college. I'm live or die whether my client is happy. Yep. And they don't have to keep me there. It's at will. And if they find somebody better, I can be replaced. Therefore, you always have to be mindful of never resting on your laurels.
And always going one step further for the clients too. And I do recognize that in the clients that you work with. And I love to see that relationship. When I get to be a fly on the wall in your internal calls with these management teams, it's incredible to watch the work that you do. So I am definitely an admirer, and I know my entire team is too. So
Well, I think you guys are wonderful. You know that. I think you guys are wonderful.
with you.
And you have added a lot of value, you and your team, and what Tiffany did last week for one of my clients with the Reuters article.
Yep.
Those are very
So good.
tangible. No, it was fantastic timing, right in the ninth inning. It was perfect. Things like that. That makes me look good to my clients. That helps to further entrench in debt and build that goodwill. So having a one-stop person, you can go to one person, they can bring in 3 or 4 other vendors. If you need your website, if you need help with the press releases, if you need the vendors, all that stuff is important. You bring the team. But also what's equally important, Jessica, is that being a public executive in this day and age is not what it used to be 10 years ago. No. It is laden with liability. You literally have a bullseye on your forehead, and people are taking shots at you. Being a public company executive in this day and age is very challenging. Having someone like me who knows the good actors, the bad actors, understands. I work with lawyers. I'm married to a lawyer, know all the legal issues. Having somebody, again, who's a confidant who can help to bifurcate that risk and insulate you, protect you, I think CEOs appreciate that because they know they're in a no-win situation. They're only as good as their last earnings call, and only takes one guy to yell fire in the theater. So I think it's important to have people around you who will help to insulate, take that bullet, help you message loyalty. At the end of the day, loyalty is everything. And that's where you talk about being on some of these calls with my teams I work with. I mean, I'm very fortunate to work with some wonderful people. I agree with you. And I could name them all. It would take us a few minutes, but I'm very fortunate to be in the presence of some high quality people who, let me do what I do. They listen, but at the same time, equally, I learn from them every day by virtue of their skill sets.
I bet you they feel the same way about you. I know that we do, and I'm sure your clients do as well. So the same thing that you're saying about them, I can guarantee you they say it about you. So Jason, before we wrap up, do you have any final advice for those who might want to follow in your footsteps? So let's say it's an individual that's listening in, that's like, look, I want to advise clients the same way that Jason does. What type of advice would you give them to get to where you are today?
My advice just would be, as I told you earlier, I kind of fell into this line of work, although I was educated in journalism. And, I had a PR degree from the University of Georgia. So I fundamentally understood your world. I understood the importance of communication. I understand the segues to rebut negatives and all that stuff. And I love all that. My favorite class in college was when they brought in a reporter. They gave you a crisis, gave you 5 minutes with your classmates to figure out how you're going to address this issue. And to this day, I remember they go, okay, you're a real estate developer and you bought a property in town. Turns out there's an ancient Indian burial ground under it. They bring in the reporter with the big camera from a local news. Literally, the reporter comes in, big lights in your face, and they start asking you all these questions. And they're like, how do you feel? Isn't this the case? And they all these assumptive type of closes and all this stuff. And I always loved kind of being in that situation where the psychology of communicating with people required that you take that, diffuse it, refocus, all that stuff that you've taught people to do, with the media training and stuff. Always love that. But also I think that, I look at things, my mom used to always say progress over perfection. And I used to get mired kind of in the mud I want everything to be perfect. And I've kind of realized that you just got to keep the ball moving sometimes. Just keep going forward. Progress over perfection. Doesn't always have to be perfect.
Something that I recently read was instead of striving for perfection, so yes, progress over perfection, yes, strive for excellence. It's okay to not be perfect, but if we just try to be excellent in everything that we do, it's not perfection, but we're going to try our best. We're just going to get out there and do what we think is right. And also, just to backtrack, Jason, it takes a very special type of person to be like, I love when I'm in those crisis communications, 5 minutes, cameras on, let's get to the next level. That always makes people so nervous. And so to have somebody that's able to see that and know exactly what to do, my hat is off to you. I mean, that's a big deal. That's big.
Yeah, I agree with you. for sure.
I love it. Well, Jason, thank you so much for joining us today.
It's my pleasure. Listen, I appreciate you having me on, and I appreciate our friendship. I appreciate our professional business relationship. Your entire team at Elevate Media, everything they do for me and my clients, very grateful. And it's a mutually beneficial situation. So thank you.
Thank you so much. And so for our listeners who want to connect with Jason, be sure to check out the links in our show notes. As always, thank you for joining us on Communicating Capital.